Good morning. My name is Scott Stanfield, and I am the Modern Longevitarian. This is the Modern Longevitarian live show. And today we're going to have a very special guest on, Mandi Kerr. She is with the Global Hemp Association. I'm super excited to have her on. She's actually here in Utah. And so, we've already got comments coming in. We got questions that came in even last night, over the night while I was sleeping, about cannabis and hemp and what the difference is with those things. So I've got tons of questions all lined up right here. And actually did a lot of research and found that this is a very, important crop that dates back in colonial times, and the founding fathers actually grew this on their plantations. So super, super cool. But before we get into that, I want to say welcome to everybody watching on the Spirituality Gone Wild Network. And for those who are watching on LinkedIn, and Mandi and I were talking just before about, LinkedIn being in this beta process and by application only. And I actually have been giving feedback to the people at LinkedIn about some of the technical issues I've had on the show throughout the time. And today is episode 70, right? So I've really done over a year's worth of shows already. 52 would be, one a week, right? But, I'm at 70, and this is super exciting for me, and the growth that you have with doing these live shows and those type of things. I want to mention a couple other things is that, the Book of Secrets is coming out from the Spirituality Gone Wild co-creators. I know I've been talking about that for like 2 or 3 weeks, but I encourage you to stay tuned, check in, look for links that are going to be coming about this Book of Secrets, where there's other co-creators just like me that have put their best secret to life in this book. And mine is to find yourself and do you. And I quote Mark Twain, and I say this, every time because it's so important, is that the 2 most important days, Mark Twain said, are the day you were born and the day you found out why. And, and every guest that I have on is really going deep into their subject. Right. And so, like, for instance, Mandi is she created this Global Hemp Association. So she's found out who she is, and she's going deep down that trail. And I highly encourage you to do that for yourself. I race go-karts. I found out who I was. I love that. And I did that. Then I did my restaurant career. And now, I found, I bought this domain name 9 years ago this month. And I finally put something out in the world 8.5 years later, what's called Modern Longevitarian. And it's been all these years putting these pieces together, putting these pillars together, and doing that. The other thing I want to say is that one of the benefits of CBD is actually sleep. And I wrote a book, and I didn't really put any supplements or any of that type of stuff in the book about sleep. But I wrote this, and you can download it for free at my website. You can go to strongforlonger.com. It'll have a pop-up. You can click on that, put in your email, and you can, you can get a refund. You can unsubscribe from the first email you get. You don't have to worry about, ever seeing anything from me again. And the book's going to help you fall asleep either one or two ways. Either you're going to go through these 7 steps to sound sleep, and each chapter is going to give you this. And it's a very short, punchy book that's it's only like 45 pages long, right? But it gives you these 7 really impactful steps on how to get sound. Or the book's going to be so boring, you're just going to fall asleep anyway. So one of the 2 ways you're going to fall asleep, I have in this book, if you're going to read it at night. But without any further ado, we're going to bring on Mandi. She is the founder and the CEO of the Global Hemp Association. Mandi, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
It's amazing. And we talked earlier, you do live shows. You've had 200 hemp experts on your live show. Let's talk about that real quick, because we're like in the brotherhood of live shows here, sisterhood, brotherhood. I don't know, but tell me about your show real quick.
When COVID started, I used to host live events face to face. And when we went into our pandemic and lockdown, I didn't know what I was going to do. And so I actually had another coworker say, hey, let's just try this live interview. And really just out of the blue, I had never even hosted a Zoom meeting. And I now host a live interview interviewing experts in the hemp industry, or people that have been along the journey in the hemp industry or affected by hemp. And it's been, there have been times I've had conversations where we don't even discuss hemp, but it just goes to show where hemp really is embedded in every facet of our life, or can be.
It can be, right? And so how did you get, I know you started first, like it was something like the Utah CBD Coalition or something like that. How did you get started in the CBD and then the hemp world? How did you get introduced to that?
It's always been something I've been interested in, but where I really hadn't what I call aha moment was I was at an event. I was there actually representing another company on behalf of merchant processing, but it was at a CBD and hemp expo. And I took that moment to sit next to everybody that would raise their hand and ask a question. I figured if they understand it enough to ask a question, they understand, they're somebody I should at least ask questions or get to know. And so I really quick would just ask, what do I need to know? What are the benefits? And realized really, really fast there was this massive gap in the industry for knowledge and a voice for industrial fiber, as well as a platform where other professionals can come together and build relationships.
Right. And it's so needed, right? In any industry. I mean, and, no pun intended, but, hemp just kind of cropped up out of nowhere, right? I mean, it was, but when you start actually digging deep, right? I had that, the quote in the intro from Gouverneur Morris, right? Which I had actually found this quote that was supposed to be Thomas Jefferson's, but it was misquoted. And so so I dug deeper and found that was actually who said that, that particular quote about how important hemp was back as a founding father for our country. Right. And then at some point it got outlawed, I guess. Right. I mean, it's just like, what do you know any history on what happened? Like going from Thomas Jefferson growing it, George Washington growing it, Gouverneur Morris saying that it's like one of the most important crops for our country. I mean, even Betsy Ross made the first flag out of hemp fabric, right? I mean, and I even heard you mention, I was listening to you on to Utah in the Weeds. You mentioned that Henry Ford built the car in and I looked it up, 1941, that was made of hemp plastics. The frame was metal, everything was made out of hemp, and it ran on hemp fuel. So, I mean, it's like, it's a really strong part of our history, but yet at some point it got outlawed, and then now we're, aggressively coming back. It's coming back strong.
Right. Well, there were a number of incidences that happened, right? And I always try to remind people this wasn't an overnight, oh, it's gone. It took the congregation of our entire globe coming together to say, we're fighting against it. And I think that it was a good, we have paper, the wood industry, the tobacco industry, rope industry. But there was a marijuana tax act that was put in place in 1943 that made it unaccessible and could not differentiate between hemp and marijuana. And so hemp was no longer cost effective to make products.
Right.
At one point it was actually brought back, ordered to be used for military, and then banned again.
Wow, that's crazy. We had I had a question come in from Lev Kelman on LinkedIn, and he said, "Hey, before we talk about the future of hemp, because that's how I tagged the show, right? Yeah. He said we should talk about how to differentiate between hemp and cannabis. So maybe if you could educate some of my listeners on the difference between the two, because some people may not know that there's a difference between them."
Okay, so this is something that comes up a lot, and I think there's a misunderstanding. And I have a children's book that I wish I could put everywhere, but it's cannabis is like we'll compare it to a class of dogs, right? Hemp and cannabis, or hemp and marijuana, or cannabis, sativa, indica, rubialis are all cannabis, right? Hemp and cannabis are separated legally by the level of THC. Okay. Right? And so as long as the THC is below 0.3, then it's considered hemp.
Okay.
And now I just saw the DEA came out, or not the DEA, the USDA raised the level to 0.5.
Okay. Right. So it's kind of like the strength of beer going up in Utah, right? It's like at some point it was 3.2, now it's 5, right? So it's like it kind of changes that way. Those of you who are not from Utah, you don't know how, being in the restaurant world, how our alcohol laws are kind of unique, right? Yeah.
They're crazy different. Yes. Yeah. Well, and I think there's a big difference too. And what I have found, two different types of hemp plant or cannabis plant. There's one that grows like a bush that's high resin, that's being grown and harvested for CBD, health and wellness, tinctures, lotions. And then there's an industrial fibrous plant that's tall. It's grown like a row crop. It's we're in a commodity and discussing a commodity, and it's grown just as such, big ag. Thousands of seeds on an acre. It doesn't flower, and it's not harvested for the flowers typically. I think there will be, certain crops where you can separate those, but yeah.
Right. So obviously you said one is grown for the health industry, for the oils and the, lotions and all those type of things, which is, one piece, but what would the other one be grown for, the fibrous one? What is the outcome or the end product for that?
Paper, clothes, biofuels, cars, plastics, building and construction materials. Really, when people say, yeah, but what can hemp really do for us? And I say, well, look around your room. What do you see? Everything in your room pretty much can be made out of hemp.
Right.
I mean, there's very few things, down to the graphing and the electrical wires, the plugs, the boxes, can be poured from hemp plastics or made out of hemp.
Well, I'll have to, back in in my early days, I was a fabricator. I worked at a go-kart racing, manufacturing place, and I went to school to be a machinist, and I learned how to make plastic molds and those type of things. So I'm gonna have to look into about how to get from hemp, a plant, to how to get to hemp plastics. I'm really curious about, how that works. That's just a side note. We're not going to get into that here, into the weeds, so to speak, on that, but I'm going to have to, definitely, when I got nothing else to research, which is rare, right? To do that. By the way, I'm going to plug tomorrow's show real quick here. Tomorrow's Tom Carizzi. He's written a leadership book, a Christian-based leadership book, and this is obviously on the Spirituality Gone Wild Network. I'm a Christian, and so I love the work of John C. Maxwell, so I'm super curious to see about what Tom has to say tomorrow. And that's going to end my 7-day stretch of doing these really top shelf interviews. And it's been super exciting. And I love the fact that people like you were already in my LinkedIn network that I can just have on the show, and we get to actually meet face to face and do that, because we've been connected for a long time, you being in Utah, and I being in Utah as well, right? I think we have like 473 mutual connections. I mean, some crazy big number, right? And they're probably all in Utah, but with that. So like, for instance, like I go into Costco and I see that they have 2 types of organic hemp seeds, right? All right. And then I go into, natural grocers or Whole Foods, and there's hemp protein there, right? And I actually heard Dr. Gundry talk about hemp protein, which is why I started taking it again. I took it years ago when I was a vegetarian to stay away from the whey protein. But I heard Dr. Gundry talk about how hemp is a complete protein, right? So we're talking about a plant or 2 versions of a crop or plant that actually can be in an oil, to a fuel, to the shirt you wear, to the plastics to make a computer out of, to where it's also, you can eat this complete protein made out of the same seeds and those type of things. So is the whole vision for the hemp industry or the global hemp association, is there a struggle for the waters being a little muddy about where this is going and what the focus is? Or is it just like this shotgun approach to like, hey, we're going to be everywhere with that?
As the association or for hemp itself?
For the industry. Let's talk about the industry, right? With that, right? So
I think that it's evolved. I think we saw a big push in marketing. Everybody, when I say, I have a global hemp association, they'll say, oh, you take CBD, or, oh, you grow for CBD. And I think there's a misunderstanding or a lack of education around the true big value. I have a member that describes it really well, and he compares it to the silver and copper mining. Everybody went in and mined silver and made all this money, but really where the big value was, when they went a little bit deeper, was to get all the copper, and where there's this massive amount. And comparing that back to our fiber and the herd to make construction materials, and where the big value comes, right, is in the time at which we can harvest it compared to wood or any of these other products. And so as the industry itself, I think we're seeing more and more money come in. We're seeing public-private partnerships happen. The USDA just released some pretty big grants for the processing and procurement. The military is exploring, hemp uniforms. They're going back to hemp-based uniforms. And so, yes, I think that the industry itself is realizing we have an opportunity now to fix supply chains and create some sustainability within our states.
Right. And the advantage of hemp-based uniform and clothing is because it's antimicrobial, right? Is that what the whole advantage of this is, with being in a pandemic and a virus and that type of stuff?
Yes, I've heard that. And yes, in China, it was, brought to be used for that purpose. But the way hemp is processed, some reports are showing that there is not antimicrobial factor within the fabric. And so I think that that's part of that R&D that needs to be figured. But, it's tensile strength, and it can be recycled so much more. It absorbs water faster. It releases water faster. And so it's great to be spun with both wool and cotton. And so when we talk about uniforms, there's a number of reasons why. And then that doesn't even touch what it's doing for our earth, its carbon footprint, and so forth.
Right. You start thinking about, of all the places that we already, have hemp, right? I have CBD oil, I've got two types of hemp seeds, hemp protein, hemp seeds, those type of things. It's like, I'm so happy that, you started this global association to help really promote it, because it's so important, right? And I'm such a believer, and this is why this is the modern Longevitarian show, is that we're having to deal with things in our modern life that our ancestors didn't have to deal with, right? Mm-hmm. So how crazy is it that laws are taking away something that actually could have been so healthy for us? We lose that generationally, this knowledge of those things, when it becomes illegal, right? About those things. So a lot of it's re-education, right? It's like you said, people say, hey, you're a global hemp association, you're taking CBD oil. And then some people say, hey, I don't want to take, CBD oil because I got to pass a drug test, or I got to do those type of things. And so it's just this lack of understanding, and that there is a cannabinoid, system in our brain, in our body, that recognizes this. That's very similar to the nicotine aspect, not in a bad way, but it actually is a pathways in our body that actually can make us healthy.
Like the opioids, right? I interviewed somebody that described it really well. She said it's like we have these little fingers, and when you take CBD or any of the cannabinoids, it fills these little spots, and it dumbs down your anxiety, or it fills up those little spots. Described it just like cookie cutter, or putting something in its spots so that we operate and are fulfilled. And without it, we need it.
Right.
Or without it, we're not operating, on all of our pistons. But
right. Yeah. We're not hitting on all of Henry Ford's, hemp fueled running system, our engine is not running, right?
And you were saying earlier about all of the full benefits, realizing that as long as hemp has been banned is when plastics became a real thing, right? So understanding that hemp can be broken down to the same molecules scientifically as the polycarbons. And so we can now make and produce, those same types of products. Structurally, those have to be certified, and before they can be brought to the mainstream. And with that, it takes the processing facility. And so we talk about, where is the industry headed? The United States itself is behind compared to other countries, but definitely seeing the processing coming in that will allow for us to see more mainstream products like Lego, Patagonia, Levi. They're all using hemp.
Right. Are they really? I didn't. I know. I would imagine Patagonia, but I wouldn't think Levi would be using them, right?
Yeah, they have a whole line out.
Do they really? I'm going to have to buy some, right? It's like, that sounds awesome. So what's the biggest struggle in the hemp industry these days? What's the biggest thing that people who are, either producing it, growing the crop, or, trying to bring it to market? What's the biggest thing that you see that the industry needs help with?
I'd say there's two. Our farmers have been taken advantage of. And I hold that heart close to my heart in the sense that we won't have this if we don't take care of them. And if this crop isn't something that is profitable and sustainable for them, better than corn or any of these others that they're growing, alfalfa, then we won't have an industry. And then again, what we saw in the hemp industry previously that's being grown for the health and wellness or high resin plants is everybody grew and then we didn't have a way to process it. And so we had this overgrowth and our farmers lost again. Hemp fiber can be, if it's processed right, it can be stored and still used years later, unlike CBD or some of these other plants, or the sativa, but it's still, we have to get our processing facilities. And so in our processing facilities to keep up and be competitive at a commodity scale are, 10, 20 to $100 million facilities. And so it really is big capital with, people that are looking to make change and can sit on their $100 million for a couple of years because the build itself is, what I mean?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, it's really, really, when you start thinking about it, and I read a lot yesterday about, hemp farmers and those things, because I'd sent you a picture of a keto hemp protein bar that I'd been eating, right? And I read on the package that hemp farmers are more profitable than other types of farmers. But when you start digging deep, that's not always the case, right? Because and is that marketing or is that true for that particular company that's doing that? And I'll be honest with you, I really like that protein bar because there's not it's hemp, it's a complete protein, it's 100% plant-based, right? It tastes pretty good. It's a little chalky, right? But protein bars can go either way, right? With that. Even though I'm keto, I found myself like wanting to drizzle a little honey on there, right? You use raw honey on it to kind of, it's like, maybe I'm going to use this to cycle out of keto for a couple of days and I'll have, until these go away. But it's like when you start digging in, right, like you see that, farmers have, because there's really no backside protection. They made an agreement to somebody to buy the crop, right? Then they back out of it and then they're left holding it. It molds or goes bad or they're not able to sell it.
I think there's this massive risk, right? The United States is trying to figure out what seeds grow where the best. Mm-hmm. And so if we take seeds that were really high in CBD and low in THC, which is next to impossible to find because the higher CBD content, everything goes up, right? And so if we're harvesting a plant, we want good terpene profile and a good cannabinoid profile, the CBD, CBG, CBN, whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. We harvest our plant and we don't get water or rain and our plant goes hot. Now my entire crop has to be destroyed and there's no insurance and no backing, even during this R&D stage. And so I think that even that piece has been very unfair to our farmers. But understanding that there's this fine line of what's it being used for and how is it being processed.
So what do you mean going hot, right? Lack of water makes it go hot. I don't understand I get
high THC. Stress will cause the plant to spike in THC. And so if it gets too cold or under different circumstances, say you have weather, basically anything out of our own control, right?
Right.
Spike the THC, and if it's above the legal limit, legally it has to be destroyed or sold to be remediated, and at that point it can't be used for certain things or
right. So you couldn't sell it to be used to make CBD oil in Colorado or California or something like that. You couldn't transition that way,
right? Because you can't transport product that's not hemp, and at that point it's not hemp, it's considered marijuana.
Right. That's crazy. I
just remember that's where it goes back to where we really have some challenges. And as consumers, where I specifically struggled is when I walk into a grocery store and I buy a can of tomato soup, I know what's in the soup. There's a label right on there that tells me exactly what's in it. Mm-hmm. With CBD and hemp, those regulations don't really exist.
Right.
And so I think there's this misunderstanding on the consumer side to the production side, and this gap in education that, really is where I'm, as an association, looking to focus and be a voice for what's right in the industry.
Yeah, that's interesting. So if the crop goes hot and you've committed to sell it across state lines, you're screwed, right? Because now you have to figure out either a way to sell it within your state, or B, you have to destroy it because it's not. And you took that risk. Because some people, some farmers may be spending over $2,000 per acre to buy the seeds for that, right?
Well, then you get into trouble also of where our bottleneck had been is in the processing side. So even if you find somebody to process it, do they have the capabilities of processing it? And this is where it gets sticky, right? Is even if I know there's five extraction facilities down the road, but can I get my product in? And when I get my product in, will it be of value at that point to actually extract and make it cost effective? Right. Because the longer your product sits, it decreases. Right.
Well, I just remember when we were talking a second ago that I worked with a sous chef that has a friend that had a vineyard in Napa Valley that was going to convert it over to hemp to produce CBD, and even have part of it to go to cannabis. And that's a great growing area, right? You think of all the things that grow in Napa Valley, right? Mm-hmm. The history of farming in that area. And a lot of winemakers just say, hey, I'm just a farmer, right? That happens to turn my grapes into wine and sell it for $200 a bottle or something like that. Right. So it's, if farmers are willing to convert, and that's an interesting thing because they are historically, the better grapes are produced by higher stressed plants. So they literally don't use any water, or a gallon a year, and they're trying to get the roots to go deeper and those type of things. So that's interesting because, if they have a history of those and understand that, they may be trying to make a higher THC. I don't know.
I think that I envision the industry moving to craft, just like craft beers and craft wines. We'll have craft cannabis and craft flower and craft products that are grown. And then we'll have big scale also, right? But
well, that's the way the restaurant world is going. And even, the provenance of things, the origin of things, where is it from? And it's like, you hold a bottle of wine up and you're like, this is a 2011, Napa Valley Cabernet, and then you'd be like, hey, this is a, 2021 Napa Valley CBD oil, right? Mm-hmm. It's like you could, do the same verbiage, but with those type of things.
The consumers care more and more. They want to know where it's made. They care that it's organic. They care that the labor put into it is fair labor, right? They're more conscious, and our younger generation is more and more aware. Yeah.
Right. The world is getting smaller, and especially when it comes to those things. I mean, my daughter's 13 and she's got her own, recycling collection company, where, she sends out a message to people, right, that she's coming to pick up their plastic bags, and either, one of us, or my wife or my son drive her around, and she goes and knocks on their door, or they leave it outside and they give donations, and she then they drive and they take it to the recycling center because it's a special bin for plastic bags to go into, because she's concerned about the plastics that are going into the ocean. And she's, she started this when she was like 11 years old. Right. And so where she's like super concerned with that. And we have to process our bags differently in our house, to be on that page. And I didn't care about the plant at 11 years old, 12 years old, 13 years old. I wasn't like, doing that type of stuff. And so you're right. These younger generations have a different perspective on the world than we ever did,
Thank God.
Yeah, I know. We need it, right? We totally need it, right? Because, the generations before us and, they said, no, the Industrial Revolution was like destroying our planet, right? It's just amazing. how it just like there was no regard for it. And the marketing, right? It's like, the marketing of like when you start reading about, like the reason Henry Ford did this hemp car was the lack of during the World War II, the lack of, oils and petroleum products and the lack of steel because it was all being diverted to the war effort, right? So he created this car. Then all of a sudden the war ends, and then all the lobbyists for the steel and the petroleum companies and things like that just kind of squashed that whole thing, right? And I say the same thing about food. Why is it that pork owned breakfast for decades? Bacon, ham, and sausage, all made from pork, was the only proteins that you could have besides eggs for breakfast, right? Until turkey bacon came on, and then now vegetarian bacon and those type of things, right?
But still
Um,
bacon.
yeah,
Still
it's still
bacon.
it's still
Bacon.
bacon, right? Because we didn't change our habits. We just changed the ingredient that went into the product, veggie sausage and those type of things. And so, but like how that happened, like, or that you see the old files from the sugar associations that did marketing to tell people that they need so much sugar. And then, there's like, beef is what's for dinner, and, pork, the other white meat, and, those type of things that convince us but yet when you look at the blue zones, the 5 blue zones or 5 areas of the world that had the oldest populations per capita, their diets, the common piece in their diets are 90% plant-based or more, right? There's
Yeah.
not any of that type of stuff. There's no like 200, grams of protein needed in a day. You start looking at longevity diets like Dr. Gundry talks about it, or Dr. Victor Longo, it's like 35, 35 grams is the max amount of protein. And I've tested that for like 6 weeks and I lost no muscle by going to a very low plant-based, protein. That's when I was taking the hemp, eating the protein bars, things like that. And it's like, we just have been marketed to on all these by these different people and associations, and in an effort to make a buck, it screwed us all up here in America. It's just crazy, right?
We've been lied to. I mean, that's I think that was one of my other aha moments about hemp is we've been lied to. I mean, and I'm sick to my stomach. We have a solution for our plastics problem, and it's been taken out of our hands for years. And now we have an opportunity to make real change that impact real people and real families and our farmers. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And so we had a question come in a couple minutes ago from John Jensen. He's a regular viewer of the show, and he said, I've read where some health conditions heal better with THC in the CBD. Any thoughts? So I'll let you talk about that.
I hear all the time that the full spectrum and the need for the THC is critical in order for you to get the entourage effect or the to hit all of those key points within your endocannabinoid system. And there's a difference, obviously, in consuming, a high concentrate THC, and that's all you're consuming, versus being able to get all of the terpenes, and also understanding the terpenes within the plant play a big role. So whether you want, an upper or a downer or something to help mellow you out, or, help ADD versus give you energy. Yeah, there's.
Right. Well, in Utah, we can't, unless it's by prescription. I don't think we can get any of those things, right? But I worked in Colorado for 6 months, and I was curious, right? So I went in and checked it out, and, bought some oil that had a little bit in there and was testing it in my coffee on my days off, never on the way to, while at work. Right. Because being the manager of a organization, you have to hold people accountable for not being under the influence of anything when they come to work. And I'm a firm believer in leading by example, just obviously we didn't drive back to Colorado and get it. And I didn't buy anything when I was in California or any of those things. But, because I worked there for 9 months before COVID. The furlough happened with COVID, but I can't answer your question, John, about if it does. I've read the similar things that, about getting the full spectrum and those type of things, but it's something that is not going to show up right now on my Wednesday biohack whack Wednesday, where I normally like talk about these human guinea pig experiences, experiments I've done on myself, because I just can't get access to it here in Utah. And so I wish we could answer the question for you a little bit better, but we
Well,
can't.
and everything I know and everything that you hear on the medical side, CBD is the number one ingredient in an Epidiolect, right? And so obviously CBD works, but in very high doses. And so being aware what you're actually consuming and what we need and how much is your body absorbing changes. But as far as answering to the full spectrum, including the THC, everything I've heard is yes.
Right.
Official.
So let's talk about dosage for a second, because like, for instance, I had Dr. David Brownstein on the show. He wrote a book. He's written 16 books. Like one is Salt Your Way to Health. And he's done some work with Redmond Real Salt here in Utah. And so what we really talked about a lot too was iodine, specifically Lugol's iodine. And also the amount of iodine in people's, and I'm setting up this question, right? So give me a second, just bear with me. This is good, right? People in Japan, the oldest living population right now, they get 13 milligrams of iodine in their diet. In America, the recommended daily allowance by the FDA is 150 micrograms. So we're not even close to what Japanese people are getting. Lowest amount of cancer in Japan of any population, longest living population in the whole planet, on the whole globe, right? And they get all this. So is there a correlation between that? So what happens is that, my question is about CBD is, what is the dose, the dosage that's on the bottle or the dosage that's recommended by whoever organization, is that even close to what we really need and what maybe have been consumed years ago, right? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out exactly, or indigenous populations or those type of things. Do you know anything about dosage or any of that type of stuff that we maybe need to be looking at?
I don't feel like I'm an expert to answer this,
okay,
but I think there's a lot of snake oil out there. There's a lot of good branding and marketing, and we kind of talked about this earlier, that just because it says CBD doesn't mean it's going to do a lot for us, right? Just because the bottle says hemp on it doesn't mean you're going to fix your arthritis in your knee, right? Or stop a seizure. The doses that are being given for Epidiolecs are high doses where you would have to consume multiple bottles of what we're buying off of the store, right? Or the shelf. I hear a lot of people say, we just need more than what's out there. But I think it really also determines how we're consuming it. It's determined by how it's processed, the type of oil that it's in. Are you vaping it? Is it a concentrate? And that's where a lot of this trial and error comes in, and where I really lean into the hemp and cannabis industry, unlike the opioid or other products, because how many times do you go to the doctor really, and when you're on an antidepressant or a anti-inflammatory or a pain med, and it's trial and error. You try it until you get it right, and then you can stay on that prescription. But those come with major repercussions, and this it's just less people aren't dying from cannabis, right? And they're not dying from overdoses. The withdrawal, I don't want to say doesn't exist, but isn't there, right? It's not the same for as some of these others. And so it's a little bit safer to walk in and say, hey, this is what I want, or this is what I'm looking for. And a lot of these facilities will have even just the terpenes. So you can try the terpene and then know from a certain strain or a certain profile based on what you see on the COAs, you can then begin to identify, hey, this works for me, or this doesn't. This makes me feel sleepy and I don't like the way that feels, and so forth.
Right. And I think it's probably, as individual as diets, right? I mean, for each person, what they need, right? Because, when you start looking at, like you and I, right? We've never met each other before today, face to face. We've been connected on LinkedIn. You have a different heritage than I do. You've had a different run of antibiotics if you took them as a kid, right? You eat differently than I do. So your microbiome is different, right? So what works for you, health wise is going to be different than works for me. And even for my wife is different than, so the three, and then it's just all different. Right. So somebody's CBD oil, one brand or there's no one size fits all, right? There's no one secret blend of this many milligrams and, of this, and then this much THC or zero, depending on what state you live in and those type of things. Right. And so, I mean, I think that the big picture is that you have to test it on your own to figure out, what works for you. For some people who are super healthy, a couple drops may be enough to like fill up those little fingers, right? To, make your little bit of anxiety go away.
Well,
Right.
it's more based on, are you a regular user? Right? If I'm a daily consumer, what's going to affect me is massively different than somebody that's never consumed at all. And so understanding that starting with small doses is probably better. And walking into a dispensary and buying a 30% or a 25% THC flower or a concentrate and hitting, consuming that compared to a CBD gummy or something else to start is, so again, being very aware and understanding also for the consumer or the public out there, right? If I'm a daily user and I smoke, say a THC flower or even a high CBD flower, right? It may not affect me or get me high at all, where it would somebody that's a new user. And so as you're building up your system, your tolerance definitely is affected through any consumption of any of the cannabinoids.
Right. So, you just, you started doing the show, you've got the Global Association for Hemp. What are like the biggest needs in the industry right now that you see?
I definitely say capital. Capital coming in for processing facilities. And I see this big divide in the industry. We went from a lot of our education is from the black market, right? And so coming from a black market where they didn't dare save phone numbers, they didn't talk out loud about where they were storing their money or what worked or what didn't, and so as we're bringing it into a mainstream market, you're starting to see new money or new business come in, but we're still seeing a lot of holding everything to our chest. They're not sure about sharing trade secrets. They don't want someone to come in and scoop them up or raid them. I mean, it's still federally illegal on some levels as soon as you get above that 0.3, right? And so, being careful.
I get it, right? I've had highway patrolmen come in during Sundance to check the bar to make sure we have, things, going the right way. And when in Sundance Film Festival in Park City, you have, more, pushy, aggressive, type A driven people than any other time of the year, right? And an influx of people that are bouncing from bar to bar. And this isn't LA, this isn't New York. This is not how you can do this, right? And so I get, the fear of people coming in and like regulating, those type of things and like making sure you're following the rules and that stuff.
Well, I even see it more on the personal, business to business side.
Right.
As being in the position I am and hosting events and bringing people together to discuss these topics specifically, I see a lot of people, they don't want to share what they're doing. And it's harmful in the sense that you don't know that one block away you have somebody doing the exact same thing as you, because there's not a platform to talk about it. You can't market it. You don't really have bank accounts. There's not public listings on all of it. It's still a lot of hush hush. And so I think until it's more normalized, it's
right.
It's really this.
Let's talk about that for a second, right? Because, you can't advertise or even like your Facebook page, I think got, banned or restricted at some point, right? Because it had cannabis on it. Right. So, I mean, there's restrictions on even like, and it's because, and they go multiple layers deep, right, on this, right? And so it could be like your Facebook page is clean, but yet your website has it, and then you get tagged that way, right? So let's talk about the struggles with social media, marketing, people who start in businesses and getting the word out and getting customers like I'm the modern longevitarian. I sell coaching programs, on how to live your best life through these 8 pillars of, mindset and breath and food and those type of things. I'm not regulated in any way really. Right. So let's talk about the regulation on social media and the censorship and those type of things.
Yeah, it's been interesting. So you're not allowed to put any money or boost ads that promote anything cannabis, CBD. Sometimes hemp will get through, very rarely. But as a business who's Global Hemp Association, and I don't sell anything hemp, I cannot promote anything on Instagram, social media, Google, anything like that. And it's not just us. And like you said, it is multiple layers deep. So even if I create a social media page and I want to run ads, promote ads, they will check your page. So as soon as it goes back to your business page where you're selling a CBD product, or any of those little scrubbers pick up a word that's canna, CBD, hemp related, it'll block you. So instantly I was blocked when I had Global Hemp Association. But this goes back, people have been very creative, and it kind of pushes us back to our traditional media, our radio, our websites, right? Mm-hmm. Our SEO, billboards, newsletters, and realistically, a lot of who we're trying to reach and who are really going to benefit from the hemp is our rural economic areas, our rural areas where we can provide economic development.
Right. So just want to say, if anybody's out there watching the show and you got any questions for Mandi or me about the topic today, feel free to drop them in the comments. And if they come in before we end the show, we'll answer the questions best we can. And this is about the time of the show we start getting a lot of questions anyway. And so the next piece of that is, you mentioned bank accounts, right? It's like, I think you were working in the merchant account, or you mentioned merchant account type stuff. And so how difficult is it for people to like take credit cards, put money in the bank, do their payroll, or do those type of things, if this is a cash heavy business, spreading viruses potentially on exchanging cash and those type of stuff. So because it's kind of like, the speakeasy that you got to knock and have the secret knock to get in the door, right? To all this stuff, right? What is it like on the financial side of this?
And I think this is where we really goofed up, in the sense of, I overheard that it's something like $80 billion traveled our roads in suitcases through the industry last year, because anything that's federally insured, so FDIC approved or insured, cannot accept anything related to cannabis or hemp. And so if you have any main bank, some banks, based on relationships, if the bank can carry that business, but that business is, the bank is not insured, basically. So if something goes wrong, they have no backing. So we've seen some small banks open up and say, hey, credit unions, local credit union here in Utah is taking care of the cannabis companies, the 8 or 9 cannabis licenses, but that's it. And then there's a couple others that will take hemp only. But again, it's really restrictive around if it's an edible, if it's a vape, some won't put vapes on. It's a high risk product still, right? And it's a high risk industry. But it's made it very difficult paying payroll. I actually had a member say payroll was really hard during COVID. Depositing $50,000 to $100,000 in a teller window to pay payroll is asinine. That's ridiculous, right? And it makes it very difficult. And so those types of practices that, again, just like going to the grocery store and picking up a product and knowing what you're going to consume as a standard business operator, those practices aren't there. And then that goes back to raising capital and getting loans, financing, same thing. All of that market that was depending on your federally backed funds is no longer available for that.
Wow. This is interesting. It's almost like the Wild Wild West, right? We put the cart before the horse in a lot of ways, right? The farmers are farming it, but there's no production facilities. And then if it does make it to market, you can't get the credit card merchants or get the money into the bank or, you know, those type of things. It's like, it's just so discombobulated, right? This whole stream of things where, like, if you wanted to open a restaurant, you'd have like literally, I mean, I had like once a week, a merchant account person walk in the doors like, hey, I can save you 0.5% on your, It's like, go talk to the controller. I have no, it's not the accounting department. I have no control over that. Right. Where, it's like, hey, we're selling, like CBD oil in my latte, right, at a coffee shop in Colorado. You're putting your merchant account at, in jeopardy, right? It's like, or something like that. It's
well, there's been a lot of mistrust. There've been a lot of over promises. A lot of people had something great. It's definitely the people that have put their neck out there have taken the bullet on some stuff, right? And so there's still a lot of business that they're just starting to enter the market, enter the industry. And I think that the banking, insurance, those are two critical pieces that have to come on board and are slowly starting to make their way.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be crazy to think that you like start a hemp t-shirt company, right? And that you can't that you wouldn't be able to market it on Facebook like other people that had like these 80s t-shirts or funny t-shirt shows. Like, I mean, like I wear this like shirt that's got, a brain on it, right? If this happened to me made out of hemp and I decided to sell it, right? Be like, I get banned on, social media and get censored because the product is made out of, but yet it's better for the environment, better for the farmers, better for, it could be American made. It could be all these different things. Right. And then just not be able to push it out in the world, even though I'm willing to give them money to do it on their platform. Right. It would be a really, really wild thing, for that. Yeah.
Well,
you've probably seen that before.
We're at the front of a commodity. The last time a commodity came around was oil and gas. We are sitting at the forefront of an opportunity that COVID and this pandemic has laid in front of us and opened up the finances. The awareness is down to labor laws and every piece of it, right? As we go. So, yeah.
The whole thing has to be, it's almost like at a federal level, we need to like get all this stuff, all the ducks in a row, right? Bring it all down and then build it back up where it needs to go and go, hey, this is okay to have on Google and Facebook. And, it really helps our country, for this. It's helping the farmers, it's like, because we subsidize the farmers in a lot of ways. I don't know what the latest farm bill is or what's going on with that, right? We can get them where they can make more money and it's healthy. What if it's healthier? We're producing healthier products for our families. It's like I interviewed on Monday, Dr. Anthony J. wrote a book called Estrogeneration, right? It's a requirement in our country to spray children's clothing with flame retardant that is illegal in Europe to even do, right? And so what if we could, produce children's clothing that would be, organic, it wouldn't have any chemicals in it, wouldn't overproduce estrogen and, potentially, be American made and all those things and grown and all that stuff. It'd be like an amazing, piece of the whole puzzle, right? That could come together and really turn a company around, right?
We're close. I mean, we're close. Putting the supply chain together back in textiles for clothing alone has been a priority for a lot of places, a lot of states. And that includes revitalizing the existing markets like the wool industry. Right. Those are natural fibers that are better for us. They last longer.
Yep. Well, I grew up in South Carolina. Textiles is a big piece of the economy there. It was back in the colonial days, when they were, growing all those things, the cotton and the indigo and those things. And, driving through Georgetown, which is, just south of Myrtle Beach, we would, come across paper plants, and the smell of those things are just, obnoxious, right? How a paper plant smells, right? But
really, I never.
Yeah. It's like, just really just the sulfur smell and all of those things is pretty stout, but what I'm saying is I understand it, right? Growing up and seeing all that stuff, my dad was a truck driver and he would go to the paper mill and pick up the paper, right? And pallets of it and ship it to other places and things like that. And so is a big part of, growing up in the South and, in the textile mills and those type of things. And so, we're bumping up on an hour here. I just want to ask you where people can find you online.
GlobalHempAssociation.org. You've done great. It's right underneath my name right here. I'd love to connect with you. We host monthly meetings. I invite anybody to sign up for our newsletter. And then also I'd love to interview you as well, have you on our show and share what you're doing and get you out to our audience.
That'd be awesome. I'd love to, because, the benefits of CBD and, on our health is so important, like even, like long-term brain health, and then short-term, like anxiety you're feeling and things like that. And so I'd love to, come on and talk about, the modern longevitarian and how this all fits together. That'd be amazing. Thank you.
I love it. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. And so where can people find your live show? It's the same time as mine. I'll have to come and watch a replay or two, but where's what Facebook pages or where you stream that?
So Global Hemp Association, and then also on our YouTube channel. We've got everything listed out on YouTube. I've got a great team that actually transcribes them and timestamps them so you can pick up topics. They're not quite as fun, I would say, as yours. We do a lot more, and we dive in deep to hemp and even processing down to the molecule. And so sometimes it's not as exciting, but man, if you pick up any of the keys about what it does or some of the benefits, it's addicting.
Well, it's not about, it's about each their own, right? When I want to get something really technical, I'll listen to, Dave Asprey, on the health side, Bulletproof Radio, or I'll listen to Ben Greenfield. They go deep into the, no pun intended, deep into the weeds on something that's more on a scientific level, and then, but if I want something that's more, different, I may listen to, Rich Roll or Tim Ferriss or Tom Bilyeu if I'm looking at these type of like mindset type things, or, depending on the guest and those things. And so I venture into those things, but I really wanted to, my message is this, right? Really is that we all have a say over our genetic expression. It's really not about the genes that we were dealt by our mom and dad. It's how we play the hand that matters, right? And that's really, really it. And you can control the environment that allows your genes to switch the good switches on and the bad switches off through mindset, breath, hydration, sleep, eating the right food, right, which I call fuel, moving the right way, and getting uncomfortable, like getting hot and cold. I do the Wim Hof method. I don't know if you know who Wim Hof is or not, the Iceman, but living in Park City, I go on hikes sometimes with no shirt on and wearing shorts and in the snow and that stuff. Which is a tapping into this stress that forces your body to rebound and build its immunity and do the different types of things. Also hot, like taking hot baths and hot showers, or people do that with saunas, and then connecting with nature and connecting with our family, friends, and community. And there's so many elements of all of this stuff that increases your health span, your lifespan. But I wanted to bring that on a layman's level in a lot of ways and not go deep into the science, so to speak, so people can kind of connect these dots and we can go deep into the science. And I do when I have doctors on and things like that and talk about the benefits, like, oh, if you intermittent fast for 18 hours, you get this, 20 hours, you get this, 24 hours, you get this, those type of things, but I also say, like, just start with 16/8. You don't have to worry about the 24-hour fast right now, and those type of things. And so I love having you on the show because we got to learn a little bit about the industry behind CBD oil. We may know the benefits of CBD and THC and those things, but not the struggles of the industry and what those things are. So it spreads your message. It brings enlightenment of what's happening. And I really enjoy that. So.
Well, and this is a time of opportunity. I mean, we have opportunity. We're creators, right? When we talk about our mindset, where we're at, this is opportunity.
It is,
so
right?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. And I wish you luck on your show. I mean, it sounds like you're getting tons of traction on it, and we can talk if, I don't know if you got to run, but right after the show, we can talk about scheduling a time to come on there and do that. And I may have to skip one of my shows to come on yours live, and we'll figure out how to make that happen. Right. So,
hey, there's an awesome thing that you can record and replay another time. So we're good.
Well, I could just do it later, right? I could do my show later on like one of my solo episodes. I'll do it like later in the day, right?
Yeah.
And I may make that my actually first cooking show, right? Because I don't eat until 2:00 in the afternoon, right? And I've struggled I've had this idea of doing a live cooking show, right? Like, because people see the things I cook and like, what's the recipe and things like that. And being in the restaurant business and hanging around chefs for almost 30 years, I have a unique take on, cooking that most people don't see out in the world. But I'm not a chef, so I'm not bound by the boundaries that they were in chef school, right? So I can step outside of that. And and so maybe what I'll do is the day that I'm on your show, it'll be one of my first cooking shows, more like 2 o'clock in my afternoon, my time. So I actually can eat what I cook, right? Instead of actually cooking and go, it's not time for me to eat, right? Or something like that. So
That's
um,
awesome. That's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
I'll have to participate. I love that.
Yeah, and so we've got the setup here to do this like tasty style overhead cooking, and I would, and so we'll do it like where it's got an overhead view on one side instead of you and me. It'd be like me talking, and then the food on the other side looking down, and kind of go that direction and do that type of stuff. So
You're
yeah,
so good. I'm
yeah, thank you.
impressed. Well, thank you very, very much for your time. I appreciate you.
Well, thanks for coming on the show. And again, everybody tune in not only to my show tomorrow, but Mandi's live show on hemp. And she's had 200 guests since since COVID started, only 3 repeats. So I'm on the same track as she is, right? I've had probably 50 guests with 0 repeats. But I'd love to have you back on the show once we, get going down the road, and maybe, maybe I'll cook with some CBD or something like that. And we'll figure out how to,
I have to give a shout out. Hempway Foods has a hemp burger substitute that's vegan, no MGO or GMOs. Is that right?
Yeah.
Incredible. I'll have to send you the link because but the third ingredient is hemp.
Awesome. I definitely would love to see that because, you get so limited what you can get at the grocery stores around here. I mean, obviously you can order stuff online, but those type of things. But I'd be happy to take a look at it. And for me, myself personally being keto, it depends on the carb content, where that is. But I'm sure my family might get into, digging into that, making some burgers with it. So
they're so good. Yeah, it's a burger. It's a
awesome.
Vegan burger patty.
Awesome. That's great. Well, I've had you blah, 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 blah. Right? The joy of going live, right? I just kind of like bounced around a little bit. Anyway, my name is Scott Stanfield. Today's guest, Mandi Kerr from the Global Hemp Association. Thank you for watching, and I wish you a happy, happy day. And it's time to roll the credits. Thanks for watching. Cheers.